There's something much more important in knowing how and when exactly were you conceived and how were you delivered, because some knowledgeable people in psychology will tell that you always carry on into your personality many of the experiences even before you were delivered. So that matter of looking even in an organization and looking at its backroom meetings before it was founded is very dear to me. But here we are to talk about SASO from 1969 to 2019. Just to veer off a little bit on literature, I have been attempting to write, started with small poems here and there, reciting, sometimes not even knowing what I'm reciting. But then on a serious note, I managed to publish this book, The Eyes That Lit Our Lives. Here there's a story of Biko and aspects that I thought were not part of public knowledge. And also what I think is undermined in Biko's person, the fact that he was such a beautiful man, he was such a lovely fellow. All of these things said about him as a giant was sort of undermining what I knew from the person and what I heard others emphasizing about Biko. So I chose his eyes and I thought that they were magic and they have some connection with how we live. After this, I attempted with the novel. And here in the novel, I was looking at the influence of Biko brought out in a fictional story, but based on true events. And I turned around this man who speaks so much and made him a muted shade. He walks around the town with the character, and the character speaks to him about the meaning of all of these installations that are around our town. Those are installations that are alive, that are there. And Steve this time is given knowledge by somebody of a younger generation. Majorly, the idea is we live many lives. We live lives in our own minds, and we live lives in terms of the requirements. You're a father, you must provide. You're a child, you must take care of your parents, and so on. But there is a chance that your mind could be living somewhere, and it is very important to feed that life and to contextualize it and to hold it as a substance. Then I was published here by UNISA Press. Then UNISA Press, I had submitted a manuscript which was not with two parts, which were not talking to each other. They advised that I could develop a book with the second part. And then came this book. This is a transcript of interviews when I was writing this one. So it's just a continuation, but I call these twins because they come in the same, under the same title. Then this is the third experiment, or the fourth experiment. I'm trying to put the ability to write and to edit and to publish as well at the same time. And this time I needed to do something about editing. I went to read the newsletter and I am trying to review, to amplify what I think are important things in that newsletter. And in it I found a true reflection of what that generation is. And the fact that the newsletter was the first publication, a mother of them all other publications that came out after all. The Black Review, the Black Viewpoint, and all of these other. And of course, the books that were not necessarily mouthpieces of the organizations, the books that were put out by people because they were driven by the influence of Black consciousness. So I love it because the newsletter sits in a very unique position as a kicker of a literature. Now in the circles of literature, these books that are written under the influence of BC or the 70s books have formulated or have formed themselves into a trend. So they can count on and say, in African literature we've got this trend, or this trend, or this literature that came into this time. there's a space for Black consciousness literature. So I've put up a story and I want us to go through with my story. Still read, I'll read to you my story, and I was going to attempt to say my message today. In 1937, Solomzi H.B. Peter Mda, known famously as AP, came to Johannesburg to look for a teaching job. He was 21 years of age. He found a school in Germiston. He had studied at a teacher's college in the Eastern Cape called Maria Zell. His BA in law was done with UNISA, and his articles were within the Mandela and Tambo law firm in Johannesburg. 6 years after AP, in 1943, a Natal boy by the name of Anton Muzuake Lembede arrived in the City of Gold to practice law. He was 29 years of age. He joined Pixie Kaseme as an articled clerk and later as a partner. Lembede started formal schooling at the age of 13. He had enrolled with Adams College in 1933. In 1940, he studied for a BA, LLB, and MA through UNISA. The two, AP and Lembede, were known to each other, having met within the circles of the Anglican Church. On coming to Johannesburg, Lembede lived with AP. In Sumza and Edgar's book entitled Africa's Cause Must Triumph, Lembede and AP are defined as sparring partners of political debate. The two are members of the famed class of the 40s that founded the Congress Youth League. Lembede was the first president of the newly formed Congress Youth League. AP was the first Secretary General of the CYL. Lembede was succeeded by AP as the president. So they knew each other from church. They meet again in Johannesburg. They are part of the founding of this new league. One of them becomes the president, the other is the Secretary General, and the Secretary General takes over from his friend who is the president. In a condolence letter on the death of AP, Walter Sisulu wrote, AP Mda succeeded AM Lembede, an outstanding scholar and philosopher, not an easy vacancy to fill. Close quote. Later, Mandela had written in his long walk to freedom that it took Mda's leadership to advance Lembede's cause. Close quote. Lembede died in 1947, and after a long exile in Lesotho, AP died in 1993. So that story dies. In a different time period, Steve Biko came to the University of Natal to study medicine in 1966. He was 20 years of age. In the same period, Bani Pijana enrolled with the University of Fort Hare to study law. He was the same age. At about the same time, Hering Ngokulu enrolled with the University of Limpopo, known famously as Turfloop, also of the same age. In the first year of university, Biko ran for SRC elections. He won a seat on the council. In his second year at Turfloop, Ngokulu ran for elections. He won and became the president of the SRC. There was no SRC at Fort Hare in those years, but Pijana was a thorn on the flesh of the university authorities. He had to be expelled in 1971. All three met and became close to each other. They founded SASO. The three founders of the movement were committed to education, just like the class of the 40s. You heard me saying out the degrees of those two other fellows. Biko was studying medicine. Having been prevented from continuing with his studies, he did the impossible. He built a health center and he sought the services of qualified doctors, such as Dr. Mampila Rempele, Dr. Dux Msauli, Dr. Siolo Solombela, and Dr. Chepi Baling. All these doctors were never paid a cent for their work. Biko established an education fund. Yours truly, with many others, benefited from that fund. He enrolled for a law degree at UNISA. We all know how he was murdered. What is the point to saying today is that he died studying. Pityana was expelled from Fort Hare in 1971. As I stand here, Pityana is a former principal of the biggest university in the continent, UNISA. He is a retired professor of law and a renowned scholar of theology. Negwekulu too was expelled many times in his education. He was expelled while in primary school, high school, and at university. As I stand here, Negwekulu is a professor of politics, an education specialist who has assisted foreign governments and ailing provinces such as Eastern Cape and Limpopo. On being expelled from Fort Hare, Biko left the Eastern Cape to Natal. There he lived with Biko. We all know about the SASO core consisting of Biko, Pityana, Negwekulu, and Strini Modli. The gymnastics within this first layer of the first generation of SASO leaders is legend. Biko was the first president of the newly founded SASO. Pityana was the first sec-gen of SASO. Biko was succeeded by Pityana as the president. Is this a sheer coincidence? The late advocate Chris Mokoditwa would have interpreted this as a rare phenomenon that occurs once in a lifetime. But for me, the class of 40s and the SASO generation provides us an important attribute in leadership. That is a preparedness to undergo a revolution in mental attitude while keeping steadfastly to the tradition of liberation struggle. They came from different parts of the country, met at some city or some university, and committed themselves to a political life that changed the course of history of South Africa. History operates as a progression of events, but at the same time, as a regression of events. Yes, it makes a good feeling to view history as a continuing onward progression, yet in spite of that illusion, regressions in history do happen. Here's an example. In the 1940s, history gave us young, brilliant African nationalists in Lambert, famed popular leadership of Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, Amilcar Cabral, and Julius Nyerere. Their political leadership managed to put in place a political life where leaders were rooted among the people. This was brutally destroyed in the late 60s through coup d'etats, assassinations, and a lot of other deviations from the African agenda. Yet, in the same period, but this time in the southern area of the continent, history gave us a formidable political leadership in the form of SASO. So you can see that sometimes we go ahead and sometimes we come back. Through this book that we are launching today, we are attempting to learn from history. In this case, from the experiences of those people who are well positioned in our history. We want to reflect on the relevance of the past for the present in order to put context in the problems that we face today. We are majorly concerned with leadership, its legitimacy. We want leaders to examine themselves. On whose side are they? Where is their existence? Is it within the people or outside the people? With this book, we are attempting to put the leadership of SASO in the spotlight, the tradition of liberation struggle and its transformative vision. What struggle did to us. We were not only put in positions of leadership in organizations, or rather being a leader of a mass of people, but we were afforded a time when your vision can be always be on a track that all the time transforms with experience and with time. We have a chance to impress on the exceptional qualities of the people of SASO, or on their brilliance and boldness. But we choose to deal with much more important aspect, that is the ability to appropriate into one's personality the needs and the dreams of people. The people's yearning for meaningful freedom and their dignity as human beings. We have a chance to reflect on the achievements of SASO and inflate our egos in the process. But we choose to afford ourselves an opportunity to be instructed by the history of SASO. On being in this room, we are in the business of transforming the richness in SASO into concrete reality that will allow us to plan our next steps. We are rebuilding a power that we had in that organization called SASO as people. A power to think, a power to plan, and a power to act. I trust that we are not like others who are already tired to learn. That we can even change our ways. I must put up quite early that I was never a member of SASO. I could have never been one. I was only 3 years when SASO was launched at Turfloop. But I want to tell you about a set of fortunes and misfortunes that I experienced in my life. And these have a lot of regard with SASO. I grew up in an area that had a concentration of SASO activities. In my town, there was a SASO office. It was manned by Mapetla Mohabi. SASO members from the University of Fort Hare were a permanent presence in my community. There were SASO workshops in my community, or in places such as Manko, which are very neighboring in Ginsberg. And non-SASO members were allowed to participate in those workshops. Of course, there were Goombas, the parties, and political education sessions in Shibins. People were learning so much from the Goombas and in the Shibins. So this whole hive of activities raised the political consciousness of the people in the area. That I count as a fortune in my life. After careful observation and deep scrutiny, it is my view that SASO derived her strength for change from her own people, black people, What made SASO to be bold and assured of her standpoint was the relationship that SASO built with the people. SASO's ability to articulate the broad sentiments of the people and her active presence in the struggles of the people are the hallmarks of this relationship. Let's go a little bit close to the nature of relationship that SASO built with communities. SASO's leadership style was empowering SASO itself, in that SASO could not be aloof from society. The gap between the leaders and the people was closed, and through intimate conversations with the people, SASO could enlighten herself and the people by patiently explaining in context the problems of society and how these could be solved. Also involving herself with the communities, SASO fed her thinking. She gained more knowledge as far as the reality of the people was concerned. There are words coming from Amilcar Cabral on this point. And he is cited in Hadjo's book, Discourse with Africa's Leaders. And Cabral writes, we can only, quote, we can only transform our own reality on the basis of detailed knowledge of it and our efforts and sacrifices. You can't just change something you don't know. You can't bring around change. You have to have intimate details of your situation. Close quote. In the circles of writing, we say writers who write to change the plight of their people choose to live with the people, not for the material to write about, but for the feel and the firm grasp of the experiences of the people. SASO understood the danger of excluding the people and usurping power to oneself, and thus growing your arrogance in the process. That power is an illegitimate power. To survive, illegitimate power requires the machine of the state to terrorize those who are aware of the powerlessness of illegitimate power. Now, through this leader-led relationship of the 1970s, SASO earned genuine authority from the people. Underline, genuine authority, not declared authority. The attachment with the people was not a miracle. It had been inherited from earlier generations of activists who were rooted with the people. That was why I was creating a connection between the 1940s and the 1970s. It's a way of exposing that we have always been a continuation of one history. If any of us chooses to select or to create distant cousins within the same family, it's their own dreams. But history stands out that we are the one continuous family. It was this leadership attribute that necessitated the permanent removal, quote unquote, of SASO leaders. They had to kill Biko in order to silence him. They had to burn organizations, demolish their structures, confiscate their property in order to silence those organizations. They had to detain editors and journalists, harass their families, close down their offices in order to silence those journalists. In a nutshell, they had to unleash terror on the grassroots leadership in order to be briefly relieved. Their logic, this was their logic. You kill, you remove, you stop the operation of organizations, and you are relieved. There were also misfortunes in my hometown. There was a team of special branch policemen, SBs, who had their hands full with Biko and the black consciousness activists that were around him. at the time. And these activists included great figures who came to settle in our town, people such as Peter Jones, Malusi Mpumlwana came from Tata, Peter came from Cape Town, Mapetla Mohapi came from Stexfreight, Mampila Rampele came from the north, Limpopo, Tenju Mtinzo, she came from Johannesburg, and Butumkoli Simbovo from PE, just to name a few. Jepi Banwedi was from Kuruma or Kimberley. Add to this group of people the goings in and out of people who came from abroad for consultations with Biko. People such as Dan Chongarero of SWAPO, and of course many ambassadors from fraternal countries. By the 1980s, the SBs were justifiably enraged and apprehensive with my generation of BC editors. In fact, they were always visibly angry with us. They had been burdened with Biko. They had had to finally sort out Mapetla Mohapi. This is a team that had sent many people into Kwanongoko, it's a famous prison in East London, into Robben Island prison, and sometimes straight to the gallows here in Pretoria. There was Lieutenant Flip Foshier, who, on the basis of beating us, got to be promoted from being a lieutenant and became a captain. There was Sergeant Williams, who always attempted to engage one in an unintelligent pep talk on liberalism, trying his luck to gauge the depth of one's political knowledge. And there was Major Nell, who was the final decider of every detainee's fate. On the tails of these white policemen, there was the whole lot of unimportant tea makers, these being the black security policemen. I had to face these white armed men in their interrogation rooms alone. I was young and innocent. But as Stockley Carmichael once advised in his last visit to this country, before his death, that we should be thankful to the difficulties that befell us. Because difficulties make us strong. That total attention of the SBs on me opened my eyes. I saw the power of the ideas that SASO brought to us. I saw that the power of SASO is in literature. The SASO Newsletter, the pioneer of the entire Black consciousness literature, was providing a strong platform of Black writing and Black readership. This newsletter was stimulating the intellect of Black writers, poets, actors, and musicians. On its pages, the newsletter was bringing the talents and genius of the people together. The newsletter was owned by SASO, a Black organization. It carried the writings of Black people about Black people. It was sold to Black people for only 10 cents and later 20 cents, a price that Blacks could afford. The newsletter was not only the center of distributing information and knowledge, it was a mobilizing and galvanizing instrument of struggle. For them, the liberation of the mind was the main job. I found an Indian philosopher, Rabindranath Tagore, emphasizing the same point about how an organization can grow because of the kind of work it commits itself. And he says in his words, I quote, "Man is born," this writing was in 1961, it's quite old, it's never gender sensitive, but this is how it is. Man is born with the capacity to transcend himself and his surroundings. In art, we can say now for the sake of our meeting, in writing, he reveals this quality of transcendence. So when I reread the SASO newsletter, the capacity of SASO to transcend herself is very glaring. The publication itself is the art form that reveals that quality. So this is the power that got to be shared beyond the confines of SASO by people such as Wali Sirote, Mafika Kwala, through their pens. Ingwapele Madingwane through his poetic voice. Miriam Tladi through her meticulousness with feeling and thought in the written word. At the height of SASO's influence as a group, the art of writing was taken over many levels. It got beyond the point of aesthetic enjoyment and social moral value. It passed the mark of intellectual purpose. It reached the point of demonstrating the abundance of Black experience and SASO's quality to transcend herself. So the writers of the 70s were connecting the energy of the earlier writers, such as Peter Abrahams, Chinua Achebe, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, S.K. Mphahlele, Aikwei, Amam, and many other voices of the oppressed. Sandile is here, and I'm happy that we have a writer of his stature. Sometimes we fall into a trap whenever we do books to think that we are the first to do these things. And we get the attention of cameras and interviews, and you think you're the one who's cracking the ground. Yet, on another look, when you take a look again, you realize that what comes out tends to be a continuation of an energy that has always been there. Either it has been in hibernation or has been overtaken by other things. But here it is. What the 70s, those who were writing in the 70s, and as I look at them and their writings and on a comparative basis, I realized that when Peter Abrahams was writing here in Johannesburg, Tell Freedom, Mind Boy, and other titles, he was just as Black consciousness. S.K. Mphahlele writes about Second Avenue, and he writes exactly with that kind of language. And these are people who had written in the 50s and in the 60s. SASO is well known for fighting for psychological liberation, the project of freeing the mind. But what we should also take notice of is that that job involves a number of particular tasks. One of these is education. As university students, SASO understood that the education they were receiving was meant to separate them from their communities and to create a sense of individualism within them. Whereas they came from cohesive communities and were a sharing student community, on entering the university, they were being groomed to compete furiously for frivolous things like an imagined future status or a so-called so-called nice things in life. They come into the university, they come from same family, sometimes even the next door has put money for this particular student to reach university. But immediately when they get there, they are engulfed by a feeling that I'm going to be a doctor at some stage. Therefore, I must start to look at myself and not at others. I must start to stick on my books because I have some kind of one individual fluffy life over there. So this is what was inserted in the colonial education. And SASO was too brilliant to see that. What SASO did was to create strong bonds among the students. They encouraged the students to strive for a common destiny. Groups of students would walk from Fort Hare across the great Chume River to build houses for the people at the nearby Kwanzelamanzi village. And in the process, reverse the supposed eliticism that the colonial education was inculcating. SASO was reinforcing the values of Ubuntu, values that the students themselves knew so well. Because the university would not teach the students about the experiences of black people, SASO was doing this for the students. This practical education was important in addressing the black condition because it empowered the students by giving them a greater control over the situation of their people. The more control they gained over the aspects of oppression, the more conscious they became. Sometimes the classroom or lecture room divides education from life. It is important to bring down the walls when acquiring knowledge. SASO could have never had the luxury of demanding a decolonized education. SASO knew there would be no one to provide such an education. Instead, SASO herself would have to roll up her sleeves and develop such a system from scratch. In the early 70s, they established the formation schools. And in these formation schools, specialist speakers were invited to lead debates and discussions on particular subjects. They even tasked each other to read hard on particular subjects in order to lead discussions on these. They had a free university scheme which was intended to assist students, especially those who were on correspondence. There were a lot of them who were being expelled. I think Turfloop had a big number that it expelled. And these students would consequently register with UNISA. So they needed so much extra support. And SASO developed this facility called Free University Scheme. Of course, yes, by way of concluding, I do realize that a lot of people are looking around for very smart people. People who, for them, look like Biko, or Tiro, or Strini, or Mieza, these being some individuals in SASO. But it is my view that we do not need to cry over these individuals who are no longer with us. We do not need to discover exceptional individuals. What we do need to do is to take back the responsibility of thinking for ourselves. Thinking for ourselves, but along our own people, while confronting the rot in our society. Yes, SASO is our history and heritage. We have reason to be inspired by what our forebears did. But let us allow ourselves to be instructed by it. Let's look back into history and see the instructions upon us as further generations. Ben Okri, in one of his books, Songs of Enchantment, has a very beautiful line that speaks into why we ought to be involved in struggles. He says, I quote, "We didn't see the 7 mountains ahead of us. We didn't notice how they hinted that nothing is ever finished, that struggles are never truly concluded, that sometimes we have to redream our lives, and that life can always be used to recreate more light." Close quote. Our people look upon us. I want you to enjoy my new book, SASO Newsletter, 50th Anniversary Edition. Thank you so much.